wanted to do is have 2 meetings before the meeting that we're going to have on Saturday. Just if people had some questions and things to present. So really what we're going to do is we're going to go right into what the meeting would look like. And what we're going to have is we're going to have ministry updates, and as soon as Paul gets here, we'll start with those. And then what we'll do is we'll talk about the governing board elections, ratifying the budget. Mike will give some detail on that, and then we'll turn it over to Bob and Don on some of the updates for the campus planning and some of their findings.
Yep, and we are recording this online, so it's being live streamed right now. We didn't announce that, so I don't know how many people are actually on the live stream. Jason will be monitoring that. But we'll share links out later on today for anyone who wants to come back and watch it later on. So in case they want some more input or insight into the conversation, they have that as well. So Paul's coming up, and
Paul, I'll have you come right up.
we're going to have him share some things here on the school in particular in just a moment. So just park it for now, and then I'll share a couple other ministry updates. This last year, we're continuing to see kind of slow but steady regrowth of weekly worship attendance post-COVID. So I would say year over year, it seems like it's maybe 15, 20% over what it was the year before, which just kind of shows kind of steady tracking back. We do have a large contingent of people, especially at our sacred services, who are still worshiping from home. So those of you who attend, especially the 8:45 service in here, you may realize, hey, not as many people. Well, part of that's because, there's 100 or so who are weekly, regularly joining us from home. And so that's just part of the new post-COVID dynamic. In the Life Center, we split the service time into 2 because we were running up against capacity consistently last year. It feels smaller, but actually net total, it's more than it was last year. It just takes a little while when you do that to get back to what it feels like to have a little more full space. We did that also so we could add our discipleship hour. And those of you who have been around St. Peter a good long while know we've never really had a carved out, dedicated, only Bible study, Sunday school, kids ministry, small groups type thing here. We've tried at times, and it never has really worked. But we're excited about the progress we have in terms of our various Bible studies on Sunday, new member community group, our God With Us discussion groups are going really well, and we're excited about that. We may make some tweaks to the timing of everything to get better results in the fall, but we haven't really decided anything, so just be aware we're reflecting, reacting on that as we go into summer mode. We do have 5 Worship on the Lawns coming up this summer. It'll be interesting because we were just talking about cicadas. It'll be interesting to see what our cicada soundtrack is like while we're doing our worship outside of the North Lawn. One thing we're going to try to do this summer is invite the worship teams from our partner churches, the Ukrainian, Spanish, and Korean congregations, to provide music for some of those outdoor worship services, and maybe some food or some kind of cultural exchange so we can get to know our neighbors a little bit better. So I know our Ukrainian friends are excited about that, and so they're looking at our first set of dates sometime in June. So between Memorial Day and Labor Day is when we have that outdoor worship on the lawn season, and who knows what the cicadas are going to bring, but it is what it is. It'll be a summer to remember. So we also are excited in July. We'll have an ordination installation date for Ted Fisher at Messiah in Chicago. So on that Sunday afternoon, the 14th, we'll invite anyone who wants to come down and be part of that from the St. Peter family to do so. We'll probably do a sign-up ahead of time because they're worried about food, not having too much or too little. So we'll send that out probably in the month of June, just to let people know that there's a way to let us know you're thinking or planning about coming down. So he and Cassandra have already bought a house in and around Messiah, and they're excited to put down roots and get started in their life and ministry there. And speaking of Messiah, we've got Team Kester. Yeah. Married there, baptized there, all those good things. So we're excited about that partnership. And it's kind of an extension of our broader vision of trying to start new things and work with other ministries to re-engage their communities with the hope that the gospel flourishes in every neighborhood across the Chicagoland area. And we just get to do our part in helping make that happen. So that's an exciting thing we'll be able to continue to celebrate over the summer months. So with that, let me invite Paul forward. I've invited Paul to come and share some updates on school as we're closing out a school year and then getting ready for next year. So give Paul a nice, warm St. Peter welcome, even though there's only like a dozen of us. And you're using the mic primarily for the recording. Yeah, very good.
All right, good afternoon. I want to come to you and talk to you a little bit about the school side of our budget this year and some of the implications that the budgetary planning out of necessity, the impact that had on our staffing, and also some of the staffing scenarios we were then posed with some of the numbers in the middle school being lower than they've been recently. And so going into next school year, we knew that from a budget standpoint, I needed to cut about the equivalent of one full-time employee. And so that wasn't going to be easy because at that point in time in which we were discussing this, I didn't have any strong feelings professionally of anyone that I felt I needed to let go, right? And so unfortunately, you have to start to take a look at things. The first decision, just based off of the schedule that she has, was I had let Erin Zurich, who's our part-time math teacher in the middle school, I had let her know that due to the necessary cuts that we had to make, that her position would be eliminated for next year. I was able to do that because I knew that on staff we had other folks with a math skill set and a math endorsement that I could lean on and ask to come and teach one of the other math periods. So in the middle school, we have two math tracks. We've got an on-level and an accelerated. Erin taught the on-level sections, and Angie Roselle had taught the accelerated sections. And so I felt that with current staff and their endorsements, that while we would be missing Erin Zurich because she does bring a lot to the table, we would be able to fill those additional math spots with other quote-unquote math people that are endorsed or have taught it or still teach it. The other half-time position, though, that was a need to cut for the financial side was really difficult. And so in looking at the whole picture, it was, well, who can teach what? Who's endorsed in what subject areas? We wanted to make sure that the caliber of the program didn't take a hit, right? We didn't, for lack of better, I guess, terminology, I didn't want to put pitchers and catchers playing in the outfield just because I had a warm body, right? I wanted to make sure people were playing or teaching in the spots in which they were strong in. At that same time, I actually had Mary Musa, who is our middle school ELA and literature teacher, come to me and say that she actually wished to go part-time for the sake of spending more time with family. While that was kind of a challenging thing to work through because Mary teaches a pretty strong workload, has a great history of having rigor but also a good rapport with students. As we value family time high in our organization, I wanted to make sure that if that's where she felt the Spirit was leading her, that we could honor that. So with Mary offering that up, budgetarily, we were at a point where we had reached kind of a target of what we felt we needed to do for the sake of the budget. The other wild card, or the other big factor in this, is that our numbers in the middle school over the last 2 years have dropped due to the enrollment in the classes that are moving up in the building. So last year when I started, we were at 67 students in the middle school. Next year, we're projecting 48. And so as I started to work with the 3 full-time teachers that I had left on staff and a part-time, what I realized is that we were getting to the point where I actually didn't need 3 full-time teachers. I couldn't justify 3 full-time workloads. And so that's where the real challenging part came in, is where I had to start making some decisions regarding what sections we needed offered, who was qualified to teach those, and what would that look like from a staffing perspective. So what it ended up coming down to is the need for 1 full-time staff member, 1 full-time teaching load, and 2 3/4-time teaching loads, with then the part-time teaching load of Steve Hike, who's part-time school and part-time church. In working through that timeline-wise, unfortunately, with accreditation being towards the end of April, accreditation is a real big time drain or resource drain. So we had those conversations just at the beginning of last week with some of our staff. And so I let Angie Roselle and Shelley Nagel know that they would be, I would only be able to fill a 3/4 time position for them for next year. Our one remaining middle school staff team member, Helen Brooks, she would have the only full-time teaching load next year based off of the courses she's currently teaching, carrying over to next year, and then her ability and her endorsement of being able to teach English, language arts, and she would then absorb that, which Angie Roselle had taught the last couple of years. She would absorb that into her teaching load, and she'd remain at a full-time teaching load. This was a difficult process to go through just because all of those teachers bring value. They bring value in their faith walk, their daily discipleship work with our students, but also some of the intangibles that they bring. If they were team members that I didn't value or feel that they brought value to our team, I would have spoken to them in March and just asked them to not return. Like I would have just gotten rid of a full-time position, but that's not what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, right, when you get offered 3/4 time or what have you, that does come with less compensation, puts you at a threshold where you aren't eligible for benefits. And so at this point in time, Angie Roselle has shared that she has to seek out full-time employment elsewhere. And so that's currently where Angie is at. Obviously, it's a difficult situation. I absolutely didn't want to lose her on staff, but based off of the sections and the number of offerings that we have of things, I can't right now justify a full teaching load for her or for Shelley at this time. So there has been some shuffling, and in an ideal world, we probably could have done that messaging in mid-April, but for timing and due to accreditation this year, really, it was pushed to late, early, or mid-May. So I wanted to kind of come and talk through that. On the other note, you never want to see a decline in enrollment, but the reality is that if you take a look at our building, K-8, we have this massive funnel in early childhood, as you know, right? We have about 300 students in our preschool program, 2 years old, all the way up through 5 years old. So you've got a great funnel at the bottom. And our goal right now is to carry those students from kindergarten into first. And so one of the positives next year is that even though we've got the full-time kindergarten coming in Palatine and Arlington Heights, we believe we're still going to, and we're planning for 2 full-time kindergarten positions. And we also have 2 full-time first grade positions that we're going to need, which is a positive. And so our plan and goal would be to build and have 2 classes per grade working up through the building starting in K and 1 next year, which is a positive. Funnel-wise, though, we've got a couple of years to get those groups all the way up into our middle school. And so to be fiscally responsible, and then for me as a leader to be just and equitable with teaching loads for all of my full-time staff. So when I think about my kindergarten teachers all the way up through 8th grade, I've got to think of what's fair and just for the full group, which is sometimes really hard to do. And so right now that's where we're at. I know you never want to hear, declining enrollment, they've got to cut staff. We're doing that to right size, we're doing that to be fiscally responsible. But our funnel at the bottom of St. Peter is as strong as it's ever been. We've added another 2-year-old class. We've added some additional positions in 5 full-day preschool, which is really huge for us. So those are really great things. Our next battle is now keeping our 4-year-olds in our building to be 5s in kindergarten, because that's now where our hurdle's going to be, right? If you can get those families to stay here for kindergarten when they have their free options in the community, you are a lot more likely to keep them for first and then into second, et cetera. So that's kind of our hurdle used to be K to 1, and now our hurdle is going to be preschool 4 to 5. And we've been mindful of that all year, and we've been very intentional about building up those communities. So I'd love to take any questions.
2 more things real quick, and then any questions you have. One would be, our hope and our expectation is middle school enrollment will come back up in a couple years. And the pipeline down to K first, our current 3rd grade class is a larger one. So the indicators are positive that in a few years we'll get back to that. And so we see this as a limited period of time where, due to the last few years, the events that happened in and around Christian education and St. Peter, this is what the result of that is. But we're trying to adjust staffing to be fair and just, like you said, to reflect the current student population, but also preserve the ministry model so that we have something exciting and attractive that people want to continue through to support. Yeah. And then also, Angie came back to you, like you said, and said, hey, I can't do part-time. You worked with her to create a full-time position?
We did, yeah. And so, and just thinking creatively, because I really wanted to keep Angie on staff. We had brainstormed some ideas regarding a full-time role that would incorporate some part-time teaching assistant work in the twos, which we have a need for, and she had actually expressed kind of a desire to maybe work with some of the younger students there, and then also have that part-time teaching role in the middle school. And she came back to us and said ultimately right now she feels her heart is finding a full-time math teaching position somewhere. So she was grateful that we're trying to work creatively to try and keep her on staff in a full-time role. She's just at a place where she desires to be teaching math full-time.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So any questions on school-specific stuff or anything about that for Paul right now? He'll be doing the same thing at 6 o'clock tonight, by the way, but it's also the same time we have our sports banquet. So he and I both have double duties tonight, so we're going to try to move through stuff fairly expeditiously, so I can also slide over with him to do that down the hall in the Life Center. So if there's no other questions, you know who he is. You can always ask stuff before and after these kind of conversations and meetings, but thanks, Paul, for your time here today and for your work on this. So,
All right. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, okay. If you want to hand back to Mike, next would be the update on the elections.
All right. This year, we have 3 positions to fill. Paul will be going off the board. Kathy's term is up, and we do have the vacant position to fill by Kevin Borchers when he left. What we have is a full slate coming up. Kathy is going to return for a 2-year term. Joel Kester is going to be on for a 3-year term, and Dave Darengowski will be a 3-year term as well. I think one of the things we want to work on is we went out to kind of talk to these people and ask them if they'd be interested in serving. We had no nominations from the congregation. I think long-term we'd like to get to a point where we have a lot more nominations coming forward, but we have really good people that are going to serve here, so I am excited about that.
Yeah, my observation has been we never have failed to fill every position on the board when we've attempted to, with the exception of we left this vacant position open because it was a partial year before an election. So we've never had trouble filling boards, and some of you who used to be on the board of trustees and directors and elders and so forth, you remember how we perpetually had vacant positions all over the place, up and down the sheet. So we never failed to have godly women and men. What's interesting is the congregation as a whole seems just content and trusting of our staff and our board leadership. And so that's one of the signals I see when there's not a flurry of nominations. There's been 2 times exactly in my time here that I remember flurries of nominations, and it's always when there's something in crisis around our school, right? That's a deep passion for our ministry. That's a good thing. But without fail, whenever there's something that touches up against that, we start to get 3, 4, 5, 6 nominations. What the board and I have been wrestling with is, can we find a better way to put on the mind of and the hearts of our church members the importance of praying over, thinking about, networking, talking about godly women and men to serve in these roles. And so we're going to put together some proposals later this year for how that might look within our current kind of bylaws and constitution, as well as some recommended updates to our constitution and bylaws to allow for an even better process. The goal would be to have the congregation as a whole see the process of nominating and electing godly women and men to this board as their primary function as voting members of the congregation. This is what we put our best time and energy into, and then we entrust them to do their work as our governing board at a high capacity. So these are 3 great candidates, all longtime St. Peter members. If you haven't read the bios, go back to your email from yesterday into today. We'll push that out again with an updated email with these town hall links later on today or tomorrow. Okay?
All right, I think we're going to move to the budget here next.
Okay, so I'll take over this part, so you can have a seat if you want. You've been standing the whole time. You should have this one-page handout. If you don't, it's on the link on the email. We can refer to this in a little more detail as you have interest. Sherry is here, so she's actually the master and the guru of all the detailed information, but I'll try my best to be as concise as possible. So our current fiscal year, we're projecting to end in a very healthy position. As you can see on the screen, tithes, offerings, tuitions are coming in a little lower than we had budgeted, but that's offset by other income, which is significantly higher. We're thankful for how that works out in the end. With the end result being, with control, there wasn't a single thing I could put my finger on to say, here's why our expenses are so much lower. It was just kind of a general, overall, responsible fiscal year. So the net negative income is more than offset by net favorable expenses, with the end result of approximately an $80,000 to $90,000 operating surplus after depreciation. I would just simply note, since the beginning of COVID, we've finished each fiscal year in really strong financial shape, and we're thankful for that. We're at a point where we're starting to pay down or rebuild the accumulated operating loss that had been collected over the last decades. So it's down below zero now. So Sherry just gave me the signal. So that's been a goal since I got here, right? So we're thankful for that. And thanks for Sherry and Pam's here from our finance team. Candy, our director of operations, in the back, just doing great work and diligent work in that area. So any questions on the forecast column for now, before I jump over to the budget column for next year? Jason's going to flash anything that comes in through the chat on the screen, so I'll look for that. Before we get to the budget, one thing to note as well, our foundation continues to be exceptionally strong. So total assets north of $7 million as of the end of the last quarter. We received some new gifts throughout the course of the year. We do know of a number that are also in the pipeline and so are still coming. Every so often we create a new fund within the foundation. The new one in this last year was what we call our Christian Education Fund. Its purpose is to lower the cost and raise the quality of K-8 education. So you heard Paul just talk about some of the ups and down trends we see coming. We want to figure out a way to pay our staff better while also keeping our costs lower and making sure we have a strong program as far into the future as we could ever imagine. Some of that will play into what we talk about later on in terms of our campus and our building needs. But what this will do is provide a third source of funding for the program of the school into the foreseeable future. We accomplish that by allocating a minimum of 5% of the value of the fund as of the end of March each year as being an amount we can include as third source funding in our school ministry moving forward. So it's small right now. We have one big bequest we know coming through in this year and some other gifts we anticipate. Our goal would be to get that to be $5 million. That'd be our target. And so 5% of that would be available at a minimum each year to move forward and help support that K-8 education. So excited about that. $5 million overall. We just love to keep a rolling total of how much we've been able to give out since we created the foundation in 2013, including a little over $400,000 in the last fiscal year. Okay? Looking to this fiscal year then, we are a little more aggressive than we have been the last few years in our income side. In the area of tithes and offerings, and also in terms of our Saints Annual Fund. This is in part because we feel now's the time to do that. We haven't had to make a concerted stewardship focus in the last few years because honestly, our financials were good enough. We were coming through COVID. We were trying to be stable through that. Now we feel like is a time where we can say, hey, inflation is high. You guys have all felt that. Our team has too. And so we're including a 5% cost of living increase for all of our staff, or as far as I know, Candy, Sherry, all of our staff? This is my first time saying this out loud, so I'm just waiting for them to say, well, most, thank you. There's a few seasonal or some limited part-time positions that are on a different pay grouping. So thank you, Candy. But the goal would be to just try to help our team continue to be in a healthy financial position moving forward. So what this will mean is we'll do a regular giving challenge later on in this year, encouraging people to prayerfully consider increasing their regular giving to the day-to-day ministry. The goal would be to get back up to a $2 million total tithes and offerings line, which we hit briefly before COVID, but we'd be coming back to that. In addition to that, we're going to continue to do our mission partners concept, where we have monthly mission partners that we introduce. We think that building that outward-facing generosity is a good thing for the overall health of our ministry, and it helps support our mission partners. So you'll notice there is 2 lines, one in the income line, one down in the expenses line. Those numbers net out. So what that means is every dollar we get, we're estimating 60 over the course of a calendar year or fiscal year. Every dollar we get in goes directly to those mission partners. Okay, so if that number is 75, the expenses will be 75. If it's 55, it'll be 55. All right, pretty simple. Okay, and that would be in addition to the regular tithes and offerings to support the day-to-day ministry here. On the tuition side, you can see our school and preschool enrollment continues to be strong. We anticipate that continuing into the future. We're excited about more families that we get to start relationships with. But our kindergarten has gone down by, I think it's 50% from this year to next year, maybe a little more than that. This year was an exceptionally large kindergarten compared to the previous years. So that comparison's a little bit less helpful compared to previous years, but it's about exactly where we thought it would be given District 21 and 25 and their full day options now. There will be, through the foundation, approximately 430 we're going to ask for our day-to-day ministry here, which is a little more than historically. Part of that is to support a giving challenge and then a matching challenge for our Saints Annual Fund. The Saints Annual Fund provides revenue to offset the discounts and tuition we offer through variable tuition, multiple children discounts, staff members who get discounted tuition. That's lost revenue that we can make up for through the Saints Annual Fund. And so we're going to push a little harder on that during the course of the fiscal year. Otherwise, what you can see in the income areas, our one church partners, that right now is Grace Northbrook. So they have a signed agreement with us for $30,000. That goes to support the pastoral team that works over there, Jonathan Frone, who spends 1 or 2 days a week supporting the ministry there, and some of the rest of our team as they share time and energy to help that church move forward. We do not have Messiah built into the budget. I mentioned this in the video. That's because it's got a kind of a separate balance sheet for now. That may change as we move forward over the next 5 years or more, but for now it seems like the best idea. So that should not have any net impact on our operating performance no matter what. Any questions on the income side? Try not to repeat everything I said from sunny Lake Lawn in Delavan, Wisconsin. It was about as beautiful then as it is today. So just trying to be mindful of that. So on the expense side, the biggest driver, as you can see, of all of our expenses is our staff, right? Our ministry is, by and large, our team. And so we are doing the 5% cost of living increase, while also, for those who receive healthcare benefits, we're shifting that cost sharing from 90% and 10% covered by the employee, 90 by the ministry, to 85-15. This is part of a longer range strategy to shift that cost sharing over towards the employees a little more. Eventually, we haven't really set a definitive target, but eventually we might get to something like 75-25 or 80-20. We don't know yet, but we're just working towards that. What that does is allows us to increase salaries and income that people can choose to do with what they want. Okay? And keep in mind, like 1 out of 3, maybe, or 1 out of 4 of our employees have health care benefits. So the majority of our staff do not. Right? They're part-time, seasonal, or whatever the case, or they decline health care benefits. So from an executive team standpoint, what we're doing is we're saying, same basic amount of money, we want to shift more into your income, into your salary and compensation by covering less of the premiums for some of the health care. Okay? We've learned, by the way, over the years, every time we touch healthcare, people get anxious, so we're very cautious with that. Otherwise, we've been pretty consistent over the last decade or more. We've touched on this a little bit already. Focus on rebuilding K-8 enrollment while trying to retain staff. That's what Paul alluded to. He's trying to keep as many as we can while adjusting as necessary for staff or enrollment changes. We also are excited by continued growth in our One Church partnerships with Grace, Messiah, we talked about. We also anticipate this time next year having something more concrete with Faith in Arlington Heights. There's a possibility that we've been just briefly talking about of doing a similar relationship with them as we are with Messiah, where they're going to need a new pastor when their interim is done with his time there, but they probably don't have the ability to call someone on their own or the justification to do that. So if we can do that in a collaborative way, it'll build stronger relationships in the Arlington Heights church community and repair a breach that goes back to the 40s, which would be really remarkable from just a broader church perspective. So still a lot to work out on that side. You'll see Keith Speaks on a consistent basis just because he's a friend in the neighborhood, and that helps build that relationship and allows some of our pastors to go be present over there. When it's all added up, at the end of the day, we have a budgeted surplus of $25,000 after depreciation. So, any other questions on the expense side? Yeah, Dale.
Under the ministerial staff and benefits, you're showing a decrease year over year, 23,036. Is that because of the savings on the medical, or is that a cut in staff?
Any thoughts on that? What am I not thinking of? Yeah, so it's not shifting over? Because who have we eliminated? Or what positions? Oh, we have some people who are retiring and are finishing out their calendar or their ministry time here mid-year. So some of that is positions being left empty during the rest of the year while we look for what the plans are next for that. So Karen Kogler, sure is trying to be very diplomatic. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for that question. Karen Kogler is done at the end of December. Isabel Peterson supports her, as well as Ray Pagels. He's done in September. So those three positions, we're trying to figure out what's the next season of that look like. So some of that is anticipated in just waiting to see for subsequent years. Yep. Good. We tried to add a little more detail in here than we have in the last fiscal years while still keeping it to one page. That's about as much as you can communicate and digest at this level, but it's been helpful. So you'll see a little more detail than typical. Yeah. If there are no other questions or conversations on that, then let's jump over. And Bob, if you want to come on up, I'll hand the podium and the clicker to you. You all know Bob Flubacher. Give him a nice warm St. Peter welcome.
Thank you all. My job today is just kind of give you an update where the campus planning committee is at right now. As you know, the committee, center button, started out back in 2008. When we started looking at what to do to the campus, we did some investigation, interviews with members of the congregation, members of the school, and came up with a wish list at that time. We ultimately culled that wish list down and ended up building the project that is the current Life Center. We did some planning prior to the pandemic. We had a second capital campaign kind of thought process that had been very loosely presented to the congregation. The pandemic hit. This kind of been on pause for a few years, and Pastor wanted to reopen the investigation into the master planning, so the committee got formed again. And since that, we have interviewed various groups in the congregation. So here, let me, I need to look at a larger screen.
You want to step forward, you can look back and see.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So as this slide shows, we interviewed a number of user groups of the building, both of the school and of the church. We collated that list into 3 categories of information. The first category is what we kind of call our maintenance things, what repairs or corrections to the facility need to be done. The second category is improvements or what features of the building that we currently have that need to be made better. And then the third category we call enhancements or additions to the facility that don't currently exist here. We then, as a committee, took that list. We presented that, I believe, to the congregation back in February, was it? We, as a committee, then took that list and, yeah, there are copies in the back if you want to see what that list was. As a committee, we have now gone through and kind of prioritized the parts of that list into what we believe are the pressing needs of each of those various categories. These are the groups that we met with, the teaching faculty, administrative staff, volunteer members, ministerial staff, athletic staff, governing board, foundation board, and the maintenance staff. And interestingly, the most vibrant conversations that came out of all of this was with the maintenance staff. There are some issues in the building that we really need to take care of, and that'll show up in the next couple of slides. When we interviewed these various groups, we asked three kind of general questions. One was, you know, what is their interpretation, what's their feeling about the condition of the current facility, the spaces they use, you know, what shape is the building in? The second was what facilities need improvements, and the third is their wish list. I remember back when we did the first time, we had an indoor swimming pool as part of the wish list. That didn't show up this time. And as you can see, those three categories basically are what we divided the list into. Maintenance, things that need to be repaired, things that need to be improved, and boy, wouldn't it be great if we had, you know, X. So the summary was, as I mentioned, collated, shown to the congregation back in February, and again, collated into those three categories of maintenance, improvements, and enhancements. So the committee has culled down the wish list, and in the maintenance category, the biggest element of that is the repair to the beams here in the sanctuary. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but the four main structural beams that hold up the roof are starting to deteriorate, and they need some repair, and repair pretty quickly. Don Meinite, who is here with me tonight, who's on the committee, is a structural engineer, and him and I have been working through some possible solutions to that. And we don't have a finite solution yet, but we have some really good ideas of what to do. The second major issue is the heating system and the lack of air conditioning systems for the original construction of the 1959-60 parts of the building, as well as the 1963 addition. So those areas are the sanctuary that we're in now, the narthex, the two school wings, and the gym and the cafeteria below the gym. Those are all fed off of an enormously archaic boiler system down in the basement, and hot water radiant piping, where the piping is starting to deteriorate and corrode, starting to leak in places, and it needs some love and attention to get fixed. Also, that portion of the building never had central air conditioning. So some of the classrooms have window units. There were some air conditioning units that were retrofit to the sanctuary. There's one in every corner outside. There have been some individual units that have been added over the years for various spaces to get air conditioning to those. But we need to kind of look at the building as an overall project, say, okay, how do we upgrade the heating and the cooling to the original construction on the property? That's the second item. The third, there's an issue that we're trying to track down the cause of, but there appears to be water underneath the floor in the basement under the MAC. So if you can picture the classrooms, the youth room, the locker rooms, that area underneath the MAC, there's some water under that floor. We're not quite sure where that's coming from. We think there might be some cross connections of sewer pipes. But it eventually will corrode and short out electrical piping that's under there and cause some other issues. One of the things we want to do and keep track of and keep on top of is the roofs of all the various buildings. So as we say here, the flat roof membranes, that really should also include this roof of the sanctuary, the copper roof. But we need to do an assessment of each of the various roofs, figure out when their warranty expires, when their practical usable life expires, and when those roofs need to be replaced. Right now, the most serious roof condition is over. Most people won't even know this roof, but it's on the west side of the gym. There's a hallway, kind of a glass hallway that goes across there. The roof on that is probably the worst case of any of the rest of the building. But one of the things we need to do is kind of assess where we are and plan for the systematic replacement of these roofs as they age out. The last item there is the cafeteria. There's a domestic water heater that needs to be replaced, and the walk-in freezer and walk-in refrigerator are in poor condition and need to be replaced. So that's the items that are on the maintenance list, or that first section of the categories. Then we prioritize items that are for improvement of the current facility. One of the themes that went through a lot of the interviews that we did was the facility needs to be more handicapped accessible. That breaks down into several different types of projects. I'm sure you're all familiar as you walk through the campus, we have all those chair lifts that are on each of the stair sections that are throughout the building. I believe they all still work. I think one is out of commission right now. But maintenance on those is a regular expense and gets more expensive as time goes on because they aren't being made anymore. So to get replacement parts and be able to do the repairs on it gets more complicated. Some of the thoughts that go into the updating of the accessibility of the facility is elevators. Can we put elevators in key spots that get us access to the various different levels of the building? We've got a concept plan we've put together that with 2 elevators, we can get to virtually all of the various different floor levels of the building. Again, one place is very difficult to get to, and that's that same glass hallway on the west side of the gym that has a bad roof. It's also an isolated floor that's very hard to get to. So not only the interior of the building, but also the outside spaces. A number of people we interviewed expressed the difficulty of getting from the west parking lot into the sanctuary through that long kind of sloping sidewalk that comes up. So some of the thoughts are, how can we make it a little bit more user-friendly, have shorter sections of ramp and rest spots or benches along the way. So the investigation for the accessibility is both interior spaces as well as exterior parts of the campus. Second thing on there is we need to improve the windows, particularly in the classroom areas. But even here in the sanctuary, there's some interesting situations. This wall behind me here, that stained glass has a strange kind of glass exterior wall too. We're not quite sure what all that is about. But we want to make the building more energy efficient by improving the window systems on the building. The third is, as I mentioned before, trying to get central air conditioning to that original 1960 and 1963 parts of the building. We want to refresh Bart's Hall, basically clean it up, modernize it, give it a fresh look, new lighting, new floor finishes, new paint, hopefully some brighter windows and things along those lines. And then the last item on this page is to upgrade what I'll call the electronic infrastructure of the building. Data, phone lines, security system, cable or closed circuit television. Basically those low voltage electronic systems need to be brought up to date. One of the reasons is to get proper data flow and information technology used to the classrooms so that the classrooms can be up to date and have current technology available. This last list is the kind of wish list, and a number of these things we've talked about already in previous meetings. But the elevators, that kind of goes back to the accessibility, but it'd be great to get elevators so we could get all the parts of the building accessible. A reconstruction of the church lobby, probably the most consistent wish list item was for additional meeting space, additional meeting rooms. So that would be within this reconstruction of the lobby. They would be outside of the school envelope so they could be used during the school day as well as weekends. They'd be very accessible from the lobby so people didn't have to wander through the building to get to those meeting rooms. There's also been talk of a cafe, kind of a food service or beverage service type area within the lobby. Another item is a new circular drive drop-off on the west side of the lobby. We have some designs for that, as well as moving all the handicap parking to this side of Highland, so it's very easy and accessible to that same entrance door that would be by that circular drive, and to get a covered drop-off point there so people can get in and out of their car without getting drenched. The last item on this list is extension of the parking on the east side of the campus. Right now, when we have LSA or the Saint Shootout or any kind of major function down in the gym in the MAC, the parking is pretty remote that's available for those functions. So the plan is to extend the parking lot basically where the playground is now and move the playground to the other side over near the MAC or on that portion of the campus. So our position right now as the committee is to kind of finalize some conceptual plans of this stuff. So we're probably halfway or 2/3 of the way in crude design of what a lobby reconstruction might look like. All of the other things that were on the wish list, we have pretty definitive looking designs for that. And what we want to do is take those designs and get them budgeted. So we can now go back to this wish list and the maintenance list and the improvements list and say, okay, to do this, it's going to cost us X amount of dollars. To do this, it'll cost Y amount. And kind of attach numbers to all those items. And then as a group and probably as a congregation and the leadership, figure out which of those items we want to proceed with. How do we put that together with a capital campaign and present all of that to the congregation for approval. So that's where we're at right now. And with that, I'm sorry. One of the other items that has been discussed is, Pastor kind of likes to call it low-hanging fruit, but items that might be easily accomplished if, for instance, there's a person who has a desire to donate to a particular thing. These are some of the items that are on that list. One is the reconstruction of the reflecting pool out on the north side of the sanctuary, getting that pool up and running again, and getting some outdoor seating areas around that pool. There's some repair work that needs to be done on both the bell tower as well as the spire that's by the reflecting pool. The gymnasium floors need some attention. The bleachers need to be replaced. The scoreboard in the MAC needs to be redone. And as I mentioned, the playground, possibly moving the playground and addressing the equipment that's in the playground. That gives kind of a quick overview. There are a lot of other little minor projects, but it might be nice to have a little list out somewhere if somebody says, hey, I came across some money, I'd love to donate to a particular thing, and let's get that done. I think the more people are aware that those needs exist, the more likely is we're going to get somebody to try to help us out to get them done. So with that, I'll answer any questions that anybody might have. Yeah.
On the air conditioning of the space that is
It's an outstanding question, and we have two life examples here in the building that make me hesitate on going to a chilled water system. When we did the Life Center, we did a 4-pipe hot water and chilled water system, and I'm afraid the sophistication level of that system may be beyond what the campus needs. I think some simple rooftop package units might work. One of the designs that we're looking at, and I think was presented pre-pandemic, was to take the outside walls of the classrooms, the glass walls, push them out. If you take a look at the building, the roof of the classrooms extends about 3 feet beyond the glass wall. That was in the days when the windows were opened because there was no air conditioning, so they needed that overhang in case it rained. If we do central air conditioning and heating, we can recapture that space, push the wall out 3 feet so we gain more usable space within the classrooms. We rebuild the glass wall, so we're replacing the glass that's in pitiful shape today. And it gives us a little slice of space that we can run new mechanical systems in to hopefully, provide heating and central heating, central cooling for the various classrooms.
I would add, we should also consider the 1976 wing for the centralized heating cooling system, because those classrooms too, the youth room, the music room, those have wall, it's not a window unit, but it's a window unit in the wall,
Yeah.
right? And the MAC has some AC, but it's not great. So I think we look at the whole package whenever we do that. So they alluded to the original 2 phases, the 60 and 63, 64 phases, but I think that would also naturally fit into it.
Yeah, the only system that's in pretty outstanding health is the original Life Center systems. You could argue that every one of the systems in the entire campus could use some attention. We prioritize the work on the original construction in 1960 and 63 as the worst case, the most inefficient, the most prone to failures, and kind of the highest maintenance cost on a regular basis. All of the systems need some sort of attention, here and there.
There's one other thing I'd add too. LCEF, Lutheran Church Extension Fund, has introduced us to an option that we could consider to add rooftop solar or other solar arrays if we want to. There are some enticing public financing options from the state and federal level that would effectively help lower the cost of that and get us quickly to the point where we're receiving significant cost savings year over year from the energy we generate versus what is being used. All of the ones that are rooftop go on top of those roofs that they talked about needing to be replaced anyway. So we're not moving forward on that until we figure out what roofs are we going to have, what condition are they in, and do we even want to pursue that. But the Cross in Yorkville has just put in a whole new system over their roof. There's a number of NID congregations with buildings kind of like ours that are ideally situated for it. If we were to take out a loan, as one example, not saying we're going to do this, but if we were to take out a loan from LCEF to fund it, their models say right now within 5 to 7 years, the loan would be paid off and we'd have 20 to 30 years of energy savings year over year. That would just be supporting our operating plan in our ministry. So there are good reasons to think about it, but that's kind of a get to it after we figure out what else we want to do in the whole process.
One of the enticing aspects of that program that Pastor didn't mention is if you do put the solar panels over a roof that needs replacement, there's up to a 40% rebate on the cost of re-roofing that roof. That's part of the federal tax rebates that come from that program. So it can substantially reduce the cost of roof replacements as well.
So just something else we're looking at, trying to figure out how do we make our campus the most efficient and take advantage of these opportunities that are coming our way. So any other questions in front of the large group? Yeah, John, and then Cheryl.
I wonder on that last wish list that you had, are you going to put dollar amounts on those as well?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have some funding for some of them already. So we have funding already for a reflection pool out here for some memorials that have come through over the last few years. We have some funding for bleachers, but not for scoreboard and flooring, to my knowledge, in the gymnasium area. We have some funding for 2-year-old preschool playground, which needs to be a separate, distinct playground. Right now, it's a bunch of like little tyke, toys in that little courtyard area. But we're waiting to do major changes there until we know what we're doing with that school wing, because that may affect the layout.
And there's some funds set aside for the beams too, right?
Yeah, there's funding from our foundation for the sanctuary beams too. But yeah, my ask of the committee is take a look at all these, give me input on what you think is important and urgent or easy, low-hanging fruit, and then let's put some dollars in front of them, because before we get to a capital campaign, there may be people this year who want to do something before we start into other major fundraising. And then people always have a little here, a little there that they want to add to stuff, and so we'll keep it ongoing.
And for pricing of this, the contractor who built the Life Center has offered his services to give us a little bit more realistic a budget than architect's pricing, which
Follow up?
Anybody ever thought about updating our sign out on the street out there?
yes.
Where updates on time of services, information, school information, whatever.
Yes, both this sign here and a potential sign on Oakton, up at that corner. The village has some pretty specific requirements as far as lit
Digital.
signs and digital and moving, characters and things like that. We should probably put that on the wish list because that's been an important element. Pastor and I have looked at designs of that back, 5 years or 6 years ago. So, yes, is the answer to your question.
We did have one bequest come through a few years ago from the Retyke family that we used to update some of the exterior building signage. So like the main entrance signs out there, there's a directional wayfinding sign out over here, the Life Center window signage. That we felt at the time was even more important than a street sign. So there may be a little left of that, but not enough to fix it all.
It definitely needs to be updated.
Yeah. Especially our routed out wood signs. Those just a little bit. They're campy. They'd be great out at Wall Camp. We'll give them to them.
The village has a lot of restrictions on flashing lights and moving signs in residential neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So that's something that, we've looked into in the past, and there's just no way we can have a sign like that on a commercial street.
We can at least get something better looking. Also, something we've thought about is for our partner churches that are here, they put out like temporary signs. And part of me would love to be able to have like a rotating like little banner sign to say, hey, a little more permanent presence just to show them hospitality. So we might look at a system that allows us to do that, where they'd go out still Sunday morning and they'd put out their sign, and but something that looks a little more quality, a little more permanent.
Now, the village also will allow informational signs. So to get a digital information board that is changeable pretty easily would be very helpful to be able to post information about, anything, service times
Events.
or special events or outdoor services, things like that would be enormously helpful.
Cheryl?
I just had a question going back to your comments about this roof over on the west side by the gymnasium, or
Yes.
do you know what the underlying issue is of why the faster deterioration of that material?
We have some theories, and one of the theories needs to be tested to see if the theory is right. I don't want to get overly complicated, but there is a tall masonry wall of the gym that's above that roof. Masonry walls are notorious for absorbing moisture, and when they're designed, there's a flashing at the bottom that lets the water get out. I think at some point when that roof was re-roofed, the new roof went up and over that flashing, and I think the water source may actually be the brick wall rather than the roof itself. And so our test is to waterproof that wall. There's a clear, non-discoloring waterproofer I can put on that wall, see if that stops the water source.
You'll see it in the ceiling if you go down in that little hallway. Most people doesn't know it exists, but you'll see the ceiling's in kind of bad shape. There's been a few drips in the bad weather storms. Yeah. We also don't want to replace that roof just straight up, because if we do changes to the layout of the school, that's an easy spot to add some new classroom space. So before we do that, we want to do the temporary fix. Yeah. Good. We're at 1 o'clock, so I just want to honor that. We'll linger around for a little while longer if you have any other individual congregations. Mike, any further closing thoughts, or are we good to close?
No, actually, thank you for coming, and like I said, if you want, ask any further questions, we'll hang around.
All right.
So, thank you, everybody.
Have a good day. Thank you.